How do you secure a nation? Do you go to war with enemies on the outside, or do you build up your strength from the inside out? Today we're digging into two totally different blueprints for national security and well-being, pulled straight from some recent reports. All right, let's get into it.
So right off the bat, this quote from a U.S. source really sets the tone, doesn't it? We're at war. But this isn't about traditional armies. It's about an enemy you can't see, one that doesn't wear a uniform. And that mindset, that's what really shapes the first blueprint we're going to look at. And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about. You've got one strategy that's all about military force, total war. And then you have another that's focused on building highways and keeping its best and brightest citizens at home. So yeah, we're looking at two starkly different ways of securing a nation's future.
Okay, so before we can really unpack these strategies, we got to understand the why behind them. What problem are they trying to solve? Let's take a look at how each nation is defining the threat they're up against.
All right, just look at this number, 10 million. It's just staggering. According to one of our sources, it only takes 20 kilograms of fentanyl to kill that many people. And the report says this stuff is being shipped into the U.S. by the truckload, all by foreign cartels. So, from this point of view, the threat couldn't be clearer. It's an external enemy basically waging a chemical war.
So while one country is looking outward at its borders, thousands of miles away, another nation's security concerns are, well, completely different. For Jamaica, the biggest threats aren't coming from the outside. They're already there, inside the country.
And you can see that difference perfectly in this quote. It's from a Jamaican political party talking about a recent shooting. They're saying the violence wasn't some kind of political attack, but it was all about ongoing gang conflicts. So the threat is internal, it's local, it's about gangs disrupting daily life, not some foreign army trying to take over. Okay, so we've got two very different threats. That means we're probably going to see two very different sets of tactics, right? Let's break down how each side plans to enforce its strategy on the ground.
The U.S. blueprint we're seeing in these sources is straight up military grade. It's a whole four-step plan. Step 1, the CIA uses drones for surveillance. Step 2, they send in teams for raids to arrest people. Step 3, the Navy and Coast Guard lock down the sea routes. And finally, Step 4, they carry out strikes on the cartel leaders. I mean, this is pure power projection.
And wow, the language they use to talk about this plan is just as intense as the plan itself. You've got one expert, a former Special Forces guy, who literally envisions them stacking cartel members like cordwood. This makes it super clear, right? We're not talking about policing here. This is being framed as all-out war.
And then you have the complete opposite. Jamaica's response is presented as a public demonstration, basically showing off their domestic police skills. You see the Jamaican Constabulary Force running drills, using advanced tech, coordinating as a team. They even brought out the K9 units and drones. But this isn't for a foreign war. This is all about reassuring their own citizens that they can handle crime at home.
A country's borders are often where you can really see its security strategy in action. So let's look at how these two very different approaches handle the whole complex issue of who and what gets to cross their lines.
To understand the push for such an aggressive border policy, you have to look at numbers like these. According to the source material, overdose deaths jumped from around 300,000 during the first Trump administration to 400,000 under the Biden administration. That huge increase is presented as the core justification, the reason why a hardline response against drug trafficking is seen as absolutely necessary.
And this whole thing gets even more complicated when you look at the debate happening inside the U.S. over sanctuary cities. On one side, the argument is that these policies just provide cover for criminals and make it harder to enforce the law. But the other side says, hold on, collaboration between local and federal agencies is actually how you solve crimes and keep people safe. The sources really paint this as a major point of conflict.
And look, U.S. border policy doesn't just affect its immediate neighbors. It has these ripple effects. Take this proposed visa bond. We're talking about requiring some visitors, including those from the Caribbean, to pay up to $15,000. The idea is to cover costs if someone overstays their visa. But, as some of the sources point out, critics are worried this just prices out regular, legitimate visitors.
All right, so we've seen one strategy that's all about defending the border. Now, let's completely switch gears and look at the other approach, building from within. The Jamaican sources we looked at paint a really clear picture of a nation that's focused on strengthening its own foundation.
And man, what a journey it's been. This timeline really lays it out. Since independence back in 1962, life expectancy has shot up by a whole decade. And the percentage of people with a college-level education? It's gone from less than 1% to around 16% today. These aren't just numbers on a chart. This is a story about a long-term investment in people. But of course, that progress comes with its own set of challenges. And the hurdles Jamaica is facing now are, again, internal. You've got brain drain, where the skilled professionals they've educated end up leaving the country. Their population is actually declining, which is a big deal. And there are still major gaps in things like rural infrastructure. We're talking basic stuff like access to clean water.
So this is their blueprint in action. The focus is on real, tangible stuff. They're extending the North-South Highway to boost business. They're investing in what they call bankable agriculture, which is basically treating farming like a serious, profitable industry to make sure they can feed themselves. And they're creating incentives to keep skilled people from leaving. This whole agenda is about building a country where people don't just live, they can actually thrive.
So there you have it, two completely different ways of looking at threats and two completely different sets of solutions. Let's put it all side by side and see how they stack up. And when you lay them out like this, the contrast is just, wow, it's so clear. One blueprint sees the threat as external cartels, the other sees it as internal gangs. One solution is military force, the other's is building new highways. One's population policy leads to talk of border control, the other's leads to incentives to get people to stay. It's a totally different philosophy on how you build a nation.
Which really brings us to the big question at the end of all this. What's the real path to national security? Is it about eliminating your external enemies, or is it about cultivating strength from within? It's like one side sees security as a fortress wall to defend, while the other sees it as a garden to grow. And figuring out which path actually leads to a better future? Well, that's the real challenge, isn't it?